I believe divorce is the option. Both or one of the persons in the relationship has tried everything they can and they've run into the hardness of the other person's heart.
So your advice is the opposite of what God says to do. The best thing about Tim Ross being a former pastor is that Tim Ross is a former pastor. We've seen him before. I won't cover what he's done and said in the past, but this is pretty bad. He is talking about how he or how we or how the church should be counseling people who are struggling in their marriages, and anyone that's been married for more than 5 minutes knows that there are going to be some struggles. There are going to be some ups and some downs, but the one thing that should not be an option, the one thing that should not be on the table is divorce. Why? Well, because the Bible literally says, God literally says that says the Lord, I hate divorce, says the Lord God of Israel. And so he doesn't want us to be divorced. He wants us that if we make a vow, to keep a vow. But that's not the advice that Tim Ross is giving.
I believe divorce is the option. Both or one of the persons in the relationship has tried everything they can and they've run into the hardness of the other person's heart. At that point, we should choose shalom over continuing to traumatize each other.
Now, for some, it might sound like that's a good idea. That makes sense. You know what? We don't want to live in a place where we have no peace. But let me just say this. You think it's unpeaceful now. I can promise you, you don't receive a lot of peace once the divorce happens. I don't know this from experience, but just find someone else. But more to the point, God is not going to give you peace. God is not interested in you breaking the covenant that you have. Now, there are people who have had divorces and there is forgiveness, but you don't enter in divorce thinking that, you know what, I'll go ahead and do it because God will forgive me anyway. What he's doing is he's giving people tacit approval to go ahead and, you know what, let's go ahead and give up. No, the point of God relating his work on the cross with us, or him being God and us being his bride, often in scriptures, you'll see an analogy between us and God and the analogy of a man and a woman being married. And so he wants to show that there should never be on the table divorce. There are times where it does happen, where someone has done something so egregious that there cannot be any repair. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about just people just not getting along.
Traumatize each other. At that point, we should choose shalom over continuing to traumatize each other, trying to make a marriage work. And this is something the church doesn't want to talk about because they think it's going to lead to an explosion of divorces. I'm not talking about immature believers who don't like each other on Tuesday because one person rolls from the bottom of the toothpaste and one squeezes from the middle. Ain't nobody, I'll pop both of them in the neck and tell them to go back home and try again, right? We're not talking about that kind of foolishness. We're talking about walking people through a process and doing everything we can to save the marriage, and one person is still like, I'm not going to do any of that. Well, you've hardened your heart, and the other person is not going to be punished to stay with you because you decided to keep your heart hardened. So
now, again, to some that might make sense, that might seem sensible, and by today's logic, today's standard, the world standard, that might seem like the right thing to do. But again, what does the Lord say? Remember, the Lord knows the end, the beginning. He's been there. He did not make these statements without knowing that 2025 would show up and people would be upset, bothered, have hardened hearts. He understands all of those things. And notice what he says. This is Jesus saying that when the Pharisees asking him, is it lawful to divorce a wife for any cause? What did Jesus say? What's his response? His response is, have you not read that from the beginning, from the creation, the Creator made them male and female. And he said, for this cause, a man shall leave his mother and his father and will be united with his wife, and the two will become one. So notice how he's putting this. Now, Jesus understands full well that the latter years are going to come, and someone today like Tim Ross is going to show up and give these as an out. But what did Jesus say? He says, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together. So if you are married, God has joined you together. They said to him, then why did Moses give us a certificate of dismissal or bill of divorce to divorce her? Jesus said, Moses permitted it. Why? Because of the hardness of your hearts. Notice what Tim is bringing up about someone's heart. No, the reason why you guys want someone or you want to get a divorce, is because you're going after your heart, your sinful heart. And so he says, but from the beginning, it was not this way. So I say to you that whoever divorces his wife, except for immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. Is that what you want? And by the way, do you want the Lord to treat you the exact same way? Don't give people an option or put it on the table that a good recourse to any of this is divorce. No, the Bible talks about this even in 1 Corinthians. I won't cover 1 Corinthians 7, all of this, but you ought to treat this woman in a certain fashion. As a matter of fact, we're told, Peter says, that you ought to treat her and honor her in a certain way. Otherwise, you may as well not even pray, because he says that your prayers will be hindered. Paul talks about that the husband is to sanctify the wife. In other words, presenting her without spot or blemish, or as best he can before the Lord. Why do we say that? Because it's the exact same thing, given the comparison, equating what the Lord has done for the church, the same thing, which is what the husband is to do to the wife. And so if you find yourself in a position or situation where it just seems rough, the whole thing seems untenable, there's no rational way of coming out of this peacefully, still stay with it. Why? Because it's exactly what the Lord did with you. Perhaps if you humble yourself, she humbles herself, both parties. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but what you don't do, especially if you're counseling someone, to say, okay, let's figure out the best way to amicably resolve this marriage. No, let's figure out the best way to make it through this. If it takes a year, if it takes 5 years, if it takes 10 years, this is going to be a testimony. Make sure that people see you as the right kind of husband, the right kind of wife. Even in marriage, you are to promote Christ through this marriage. And so for him to come and do this, I think it's just horrible. I think it's a bad thing to do. What it is just kind of conforming with the world. Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but that's what he's doing. He is conforming himself, or having people who are in struggling or difficult marriages to conform to the world. No, do what might be difficult, but it's definitely worthwhile. That is to do everything you can to preserve this marriage. Yet another reason why no one, and I do mean no one, should ever listen to Tim Ross.